Every crime tells a story, and every story deserves to be heard. For more true crime stories, kindly hit that subscribe button and turn on notification bell so you never miss a new episode. The Angeles National Forest is the kind of place that draws people searching for escape. Just an hour outside Los Angeles, its winding roads and towering pines can make you forget you're anywhere near a city. Families barbecue near creeks, hikers lose themselves in endless trails, and couples drive up to catch sunsets spilling orange fire over the mountains. But beneath the beauty lies isolation, the kind of silence where secrets can be buried. It was in that silence, on a hot August afternoon, that two hikers stumbled upon something they would never forget. They had been following a trail that cut deep into a shaded canyon, where the air grew cooler and the smell of pine needles hung thick. The path was quiet until the sound of flies broke through the stillness. As they rounded a bend, they noticed what looked like a bundle near the base of a tree. At first glance, it could have been camping gear, a discarded sleeping bag, maybe. But as they got closer, the truth became impossible to ignore. The woman lay crumpled in the dirt, partially obscured by brush. She was dressed in casual clothing, her features pale and lifeless. Her hair was matted, her face bruised. One of the hikers gasped and staggered back, fumbling for his phone. Within minutes, a 911 call went out. "We found a woman. She's not moving. Please hurry." By the time Los Angeles County Sheriff's deputies arrived, the area had been sealed off with yellow tape. Detectives worked quietly under the punishing sun, cataloging every detail. At first, no one knew who she was, only that she was young, that her death was violent, and that someone had gone to great lengths to leave her in a place where they hoped she wouldn't be found. The Angeles National Forest had seen its share of accidents and tragedies, but this was different. Something about the staging, the location, felt deliberate. And as the coroner's van carried her body away, investigators already suspected this was no random act. Within 24 hours, fingerprints confirmed her identity. Sheylla Cabrera, a 30-year-old mother of 3 from Los Angeles. When detectives arrived at her family's home to deliver the news, grief ripped through the small living room. Her parents sobbed uncontrollably, clutching one another as they demanded answers. Her sister covered her face with trembling hands, repeating over and over, "Not Sheylla, not her." Neighbors soon gathered outside the house, leaving flowers and candles by the walkway. Many described Sheylla as kind, soft-spoken, and devoted to her children. She worked part-time, volunteered at her church, and was the kind of person who remembered birthdays and checked on sick neighbors. So how had she ended up dead in the forest, alone and abandoned? Detectives began piecing together her last known movements. On the evening before her body was discovered, Sheylla had reportedly been at home with her husband, Jossimar Cabrera Cornejo, and their children. The couple's relationship, as investigators would soon learn, had not been a peaceful one. Friends confided that Sheylla had been planning to file a police report about abuse. She had spoken of control, of fear, of nights spent in quiet tears. She had told a close friend that she was finally ready to leave him, but she never got the chance. When detectives tried to contact Jossimar, he was nowhere to be found. Neighbors hadn't seen him since the weekend. His phone went straight to voicemail. A check of international flight logs revealed a stunning detail. Just hours after Sheyella's body was discovered, Jossimar had boarded a plane with their 3 children, destination Peru. At first, investigators couldn't rule out the possibility that Sheylla had been killed by a stranger. The Angeles National Forest was vast and remote. Assaults and robberies had happened there before. But Jossimar's sudden disappearance changed everything. Detective Maria Alvarez, a veteran with the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, later recalled her gut reaction. When a spouse vanishes with the kids right after their partner turns up dead, that's not coincidence. That's a red flag the size of California. Still, procedure mattered. Detectives worked the crime scene for trace evidence. Tire tracks suggested a vehicle had been parked near the body. Surveillance cameras from roads leading into the forest showed a car matching Jossimar's registered vehicle heading north late at night. Meanwhile, forensic teams combed through the Cabrera home. In the garage, they found faint traces of blood. In the couple's bedroom, detectives noticed the bed linens were missing, stripped away in a hurry. It wasn't proof, not yet, but it was damning. When detectives spoke with Sheyella's friends, a chilling picture emerged. She had confided her fears about Jossimar's temper. She had mentioned being watched, her phone checked, her movements monitored. One friend recalled Sheylla whispering over coffee, "If anything happens to me, you know who did it." And then there was the hardest detail of all. Sheylla had been preparing to walk into a police station the week she died, ready to file a formal report. She had almost made it. As detectives dug deeper, Sheyella's marriage revealed cracks that went far beyond the occasional argument. Family friends spoke of Jossimar as a man who could be charming in public, always smiling at barbecues, polite at church, eager to lend a hand. But behind closed doors, the picture was far darker. He was jealous, controlling, quick to anger. One relative told detectives about a Thanksgiving dinner 2 years earlier. Everyone had gathered at the Cabrera home, but the evening ended abruptly. Sheylla had gone into the kitchen to grab more food, and a muffled argument erupted. Guests could hear raised voices. Moments later, Sheylla reemerged, her eyes red, forcing a smile. She kept saying she was fine, the relative recalled, but you could see it in her face. She wasn't fine. Detectives pulled text messages between the couple. In them, Sheylla pleaded for space, for peace. Jossimar's replies were angry, laced with accusations of betrayal. The most chilling discovery came from Sheyella's journal, tucked away in a drawer. In neat handwriting, she described feeling trapped, watched, and afraid. One entry read, "I want to believe he'll change, but I know he won't. If I stay, I'll lose myself. If I leave, I'm afraid of what he might do." The journal made detectives pause. Sheylla had known the danger. She had tried to find the courage to leave, and now she was gone. The question wasn't just who killed her anymore. It was how long she had been living in quiet terror before her death. The manhunt shifted internationally. News broke that Jossimar had boarded a flight with the couple's 3 children, ages 4, 7, and 10. He had family in Peru, and investigators feared he intended to disappear into the rural countryside, far from extradition treaties and U.S. law enforcement's reach. The FBI joined the case. Alerts went out through Interpol. Sheyella's story hit U.S. media outlets, sparking outrage. Commentators asked how a man suspected of murder had managed to leave the country so easily. Meanwhile, in Peru, Jossimar appeared on local news broadcasts. Grainy footage of him holding his children's hands, ducking past cameras. Reporters shouted questions. He stayed silent. Detectives in Los Angeles followed every lead. They pored over financial records, learning he had drained joint accounts before fleeing. He had wired money to relatives overseas. It became clear this wasn't a panicked escape. It was a calculated move. But then came an unexpected twist. Weeks after arriving in Peru, Jossimar walked into a police station in Lima and surrendered. He didn't fight. He didn't run further. Instead, he calmly turned himself in, insisting he was innocent and that his wife's death had nothing to do with him. To U.S. investigators, the surrender was a performance. To Sheyella's grieving family, it was salt in an open wound. They didn't want to hear his denials. They wanted justice. Back in California, the community gathered for Sheyella's funeral. Hundreds filled the church pews. Her children, still in Peru, were absent, a devastating reminder of how much had been torn apart. The pastor spoke gently about light, about love, about resilience. But the grief in the room was overwhelming. Friends clutched tissues, mothers held their daughters a little tighter, and neighbors whispered prayers for 3 children caught in the crossfire of tragedy. Detectives attended quietly, standing at the back. For them, the case was far from over. They knew the legal process of extradition could take months, even years. They also knew that memories fade, evidence weakens, and public interest moves on. Their job was to keep Sheyella's story alive long enough to see it through a courtroom. Meanwhile, Sheyella's parents began the fight for custody of the children. They argued that the kids had already lost one parent, and the other was now accused of murder. They wanted them home, in the only country they had ever known. The emotional toll on the family was immense. One of Shella's sisters later told a reporter that we're not just grieving her death. We're grieving every future moment she was supposed to have. Birthdays, graduations, weddings. She should be here. And he took that away. For the public, the story was shocking. But for advocates of domestic violence survivors, it was heartbreakingly familiar. Every year in the U.S., more than 1,500 women are killed by men they know, husbands, boyfriends, partners they once trusted. Shella's death was not an isolated case. It was part of a devastating pattern. And now, all eyes were on whether the system could bring her suspected killer back to face justice in California. Extradition cases are never simple, and Jossimar Cabrera's was no exception. After his surrender in Lima, he was placed under Peruvian custody while U.S. officials filed the necessary paperwork to bring him back to Los Angeles. But Peru, like many countries, has strict processes to protect its citizens, even those accused of violent crimes abroad. Jossimar hired local attorneys, who argued that he was being unfairly targeted and that the evidence against him was circumstantial. They claimed he had taken his children to Peru simply to protect them from the chaos of false accusations in the U.S. In California, prosecutors bristled at the suggestion. They had collected DNA samples, flight records, financial withdrawals, and the testimony of Shella's friends and family. To them, the picture was clear. Jossimar had motive, opportunity, and the most to gain from Shella's death. But in Peru, the courtroom atmosphere was different. Judges listened carefully. The media swarmed the hearings. Every new detail about the case, every tearful statement from Shella's relatives, every defiant denial from Jossimar's camp, was broadcast to homes across two nations. For Shella's family, it was a painful waiting game. Her mother, Anna, told an LA reporter that it feels like he's hiding behind paperwork. But my daughter deserves justice, and my grandchildren deserve peace. We won't stop fighting until he's back here, in front of a judge, answering for what he did. While the extradition battle played out, detectives in Los Angeles kept digging. They knew they needed the strongest possible case when not if Jossimar returned. That's when a new piece of evidence surfaced. A co-worker of Shella's came forward with an email she had received just days before Shella's death. In it, Sheylla confided about her fear, writing that she planned to finally file a police report against Jossimar for years of abuse. The co-worker had hesitated to share it earlier, unsure if it mattered. But to detectives, it was a turning point. This wasn't just speculation about marital problems. This was a documented, written cry for help. Detectives also pulled security camera footage from near the Cabrera home. In the days before Sheylla disappeared, Jossimar was seen loading heavy bags into his car at odd hours of the night. Neighbors described hearing loud arguments, followed by silence. Together, these findings painted a devastating picture. Sheylla was preparing to break free, and Jossimar may have acted to stop her. One detective put it bluntly, saying, "He didn't just lose control in a moment of rage. This looks like a man who planned ahead, who made sure she'd never walk away from him." As investigators built their case, Shella's loved ones became her voice. Her younger sister, Daniela, recorded a video statement that went viral on social media. In it, she spoke directly to the camera, holding up a framed photo of Sheylla, saying, "My sister was more than a headline. She was a mother, a daughter, a friend. She had dreams. She wanted to be safe. And now she's gone. Please don't let her story fade away. We need justice, not just for her, but for every woman who is told to keep quiet, to stay, to forgive until it's too late." The video struck a chord. Advocacy groups picked it up, tying Shella's death to the larger crisis of domestic violence in America. Hashtags spread, petitions circulated, and vigils were held in her name. Meanwhile, the children, still in Peru, became the center of a custody battle that broke hearts across both countries. Would they be returned to the U.S. to live with Shella's family, or remain under the shadow of their father's case? Every update, every court date, every statement from officials carried enormous weight. For those closest to Sheylla, the wait for resolution felt endless. But beneath the grief was determination. Her mother put it best: he thought he could silence her forever. But the truth has a way of coming out, and we will keep speaking it until there's justice. The Peruvian courtroom was crowded, its wood-paneled walls echoing with whispers as cameras clicked and journalists jotted notes. It had been nearly a year since Jossimar Cabrera surrendered to authorities in Lima, and every hearing since then had stretched the patience of both nations. On this day, however, there would be no delays, no extensions, no further stalling. The judge delivered the ruling in a firm, steady voice. Jossimar Cabrera Cornejo would be extradited to the United States to face charges of murder in the death of his wife, Sheylla Cabrera. The decision drew gasps in the courtroom. Reporters rushed to file their stories. In Los Angeles, Shella's family wept as the news reached them. After months of anguish, it was the first step toward real accountability. But in Peru, Jossimar's face remained cold, almost indifferent. His lawyers vowed to appeal, claiming his human rights were being trampled. Yet privately, prosecutors in both countries knew the appeals would fail. The evidence was overwhelming, and diplomatic pressure was mounting. For Shella's mother, Anna, the ruling was bittersweet. Speaking outside her modest California home, she told local TV crews, saying, "This doesn't bring my daughter back, but it means her voice is finally being heard. He thought he could run. He thought he could hide. But justice is catching up." In early spring, under tight security, Jossimar was escorted aboard a U.S. Marshal Service plane bound for Los Angeles. His wrists were shackled, his movements monitored, and his future suddenly narrowed to the cold walls of a California jail cell. The flight itself became symbolic. For investigators who had spent countless hours piecing together Shella's story, it marked the end of an international chase. For the media, it was a striking visual. A man accused of killing his wife in the shadowy depths of Angeles National Forest being flown thousands of miles back to the very place where it all began. When the plane touched down at LAX, cameras were waiting. Jossimar was led down the steps in handcuffs, flanked by armed marshals. Inside the courtroom a week later, he made his first U.S. appearance. Wearing an orange jumpsuit, he stood silently as the charges were read. Murder, kidnapping for taking the children across borders, domestic violence with fatal outcome. The judge denied bail, citing flight risk and the severity of the allegations. For Shella's family, seeing him back on U.S. soil brought a mix of relief and rage. Daniela, Sheila's sister, later admitted to a reporter saying, "When I saw him standing there, I thought about all the nights my sister was too scared to call for help. I thought about how she wanted to escape, and I thought, finally, now he has to listen." The weeks that followed were consumed by pretrial hearings. Prosecutors laid out their timeline. Sheylla had been planning to file a police report. Jossimar discovered her intentions. An argument escalated into violence. He disposed of her body in Angeles National Forest. Days later, he fled to Peru with their children. Defense attorneys painted a different picture. They argued there was no physical evidence directly tying Jossimar to Shella's death. They claimed the investigation had been rushed, built on circumstantial inferences and emotional testimonies. But the prosecution countered with chilling details. Traces of Shella's blood found in the trunk of the family car, inconsistencies in Jossimar's statements, and the damning email she had written to her coworker. As the case moved forward, the courtroom atmosphere grew heavier. Journalists filled the gallery. Advocacy groups showed up wearing purple ribbons for domestic violence awareness. Every testimony, every legal maneuver was amplified in the press. And for Shella's family, the emotional toll was relentless. Each hearing forced them to relive the worst days of their lives. Each new detail carved fresh wounds. Yet they endured, determined to see the process through. Outside the courthouse one afternoon, Anna spoke softly to a cluster of supporters, saying, "This isn't just about Sheylla anymore. It's about every woman who didn't get the chance to leave, every woman whose story was buried. We have to keep going. For them too." The trial of Jossimar Cabrera Cornejo opened in Los Angeles County Superior Court to a packed courtroom. By then, the case had become a fixture in national headlines. A young mother murdered in a forest, a husband fleeing across borders with their children, and an extradition battle that gripped two countries. Television trucks lined the courthouse steps, their satellite dishes pointed skyward. Inside, prosecutors wasted no time. In their opening statement, they told the jury this case was about control, fear, and finally, a woman's desperate attempt at freedom that ended in tragedy. They described Sheylla Cabrera not as a headline, but as a daughter, sister, co-worker, and mother who was trying to reclaim her life. They walked the jury through the months leading up to her death. The arguments, the bruises that went unexplained, the whispered confidences to friends. The defense countered with a starkly different portrait. They argued that no direct eyewitness tied Jossimar to the murder, that the evidence was circumstantial, and that the state was exploiting the emotional weight of domestic violence narratives. But when the prosecution began calling witnesses, the room grew still. A neighbor testified to hearing shouting on the night Sheylla vanished. A co-worker read aloud the email Sheylla had written. "If anything happens to me, look at him first." A detective detailed the forensic evidence. Small traces of blood in the trunk, consistent with Sheyella's DNA. The most gut-wrenching moment came when Sheyella's 10-year-old daughter testified in a closed session, later summarized for the jury. Her words painted a chilling picture of fear and confusion, of a household filled with tension, of the sudden disappearance of her mother. After 3 weeks of testimony, the trial drew to a close. Both sides gave their final arguments. The prosecution urged the jury to see the larger pattern. A man desperate to maintain control over his wife, lashing out when she finally tried to escape. This was not random. This was not fate. This was murder born of control and fear. The defense repeated their claim of reasonable doubt, insisting the case relied too heavily on circumstantial evidence. "Don't let emotion replace proof," they told the jury. Then the jury retired to deliberate. For 2 days, the families waited. Sheyella's relatives clutched rosaries, whispered prayers, and stared at the clock as hours stretched into silence. Jossimar sat motionless at the defense table, showing little emotion. On the 3rd day, word came. The jury had reached a verdict. The courtroom filled once more. The judge asked the foreperson to rise. On the charge of murder in the 1st degree, we find the defendant, Jossimar Cabrera Cornejo, guilty. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Sheyella's mother wept openly. Daniela embraced her, whispering, "She can finally rest now." The judge sentenced Jossimar to life in prison without the possibility of parole. His children, now living with relatives in California, would grow up away from his shadow. For the first time since Sheyella's body had been discovered in Angeles National Forest, justice felt tangible. The trial may have ended, but the story of Sheylla Cabrera resonated far beyond one courtroom. In Los Angeles, advocacy groups launched campaigns in her memory, highlighting the dangers of domestic abuse and the importance of early intervention. Local news outlets revisited the case as a call to action, urging women to speak out, communities to listen, and authorities to respond more swiftly to cries for help. Nationally, the case reignited conversations about domestic violence laws, the challenges of cross-border custody disputes, and the haunting fact that so many victims never make it to safety. For Sheyella's family, the aftermath was bittersweet. Her mother, Anna, often spoke of her daughter's kindness, her laugh, her dream of giving her children a better life. "She was more than what happened to her," Anna told a reporter. "I want people to remember the way she lived, not just the way she died." Her children, though scarred, were given counseling and the support of relatives determined to raise them in love, not fear. And in the Angeles National Forest, where hikers still wander beneath towering pines, a small memorial cross now marks the place where Sheyella's life ended too soon. Visitors sometimes pause there, leaving flowers or notes, even if they never knew her. It stands as a quiet reminder that behind every headline is a human life, and that justice, though slow, can sometimes find its way through even the darkest woods. For more chilling true crime content, kindly subscribe to this channel. See you soon.